I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, a 45-minute train ride and then a subway ride on the Lex to Yankee Stadium. Beginning when I was 3 years old, the Yankees won the pennant almost every year until I was 18 and in college. When I was 13, I went to the Stamford Library where I came upon a book in the sports section by Frank Graham titled The New York Yankees. It was written in 1947, and in it were conversations with Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Joe DiMaggio. I learned about managers Miller Huggins and Joe McCarthy, and I was overwhelmed by how much the book meant to me, because what it told me more than anything else was what really was going on behind the scenes. It was factual gossip, and I was hooked and glued to the pages. After I graduated from St. Luke's School in New Canaan, Connecticut, where headmaster Dr. Joseph R. Kidd made me religiously memorize the Century Handbook of Writing, which still sits behind my desk, I went to Dartmouth College, where I became the sports editor of the Dartmouth, the daily newspaper. As a freshman, I wrote varsity football, and I had a weekly column, Dartmouth Sports Today, in which mostly I lionized our athletes. Former star Yankee third baseman Red Rolfe was Dartmouth's athletic director, and I idolized him. I would go into his office, and he would tell me stories about his teammates, including Joe DiMaggio and Bill Dickey. He was in uniform on the field the day a dying Lou Gehrig proclaimed he was the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I wish I had taped those conversations. My choice was either to go to Vietnam or to New York University Law School, and I chose law school. And while there, I worked a deal with my friend Bob Kennedy, son of J. Walter Kennedy, the NBA commissioner. Bob was the sports editor of the Stamford Advocate. If he would give me press credentials, I said, I would write him articles on the weekends for free. He agreed. I then had access to all the professional New York teams, the Yankees, Mets, Giants, Jets, Knicks, Rangers, Islanders, and Cosmos with Pele. I interviewed the likes of O.J. Simpson, Joe Namath, and Andy Bathgate. The Knicks' Phil Jackson and I became close friends. After I somehow graduated from law school, I took a job working for a law firm in Manhattan. I was handed a tall piece of tort cases and told to go through them. I discovered that in a dozen cases, mostly trip and fall and minor injury cases, the 10-year statute of limitations had run out. In other words, because of the firm's lack of interest, their clients were no longer legally allowed to sue. I asked one of the partners what I should do. "Call them up and tell them why they don't have a case," he said. "I quit," I said. I went home and opened the New York Times want ads section for employment. One said, "Wanted, a lawyer and a writer for our publication." At the end was a 201 area code and a telephone number, New Jersey. I lived in a tiny apartment in the Roger Williams Hotel in Manhattan. I figured I could drive there. I called. The woman who answered said I was calling Prentice Hall, located in Inglewood Cliffs. They were looking for an associate editor for a new monthly publication about President Richard Nixon's wage and price controls. Was I interested? I drove to Inglewood Cliffs and was hired. The job paid $7,500 a year. Beginning in July 1972, I pondered the new regulations relating to wages and prices. My job was to translate them into English for the weekly Prentice Hall publication that went to banks and to interested corporations. I discovered rather quickly that when any union or group of employees wanted to raise their wages, they were turned down. At the same time, when a company wanted to hike prices, the Wage and Control Board approved their action. Something is really wrong about this, I thought. After 6 weeks, I was ready for something new. Before lunch one day, I happened to run across a catalog of Prentice Hall's trade books. There was a 1, a 2.